Welcome to the Wake Up Protocol. I am your host, Nadia Haldeman, and together we're having life-changing conversations with real people about spiritual awakening and the transformations that follow. We're mapping the messy path of awakening so you can go further faster and feel a little less alone along the way. For this week's episode of the Wake Up Protocol, I'm sitting down with Ben Browner. Ben is the founder and lead producer of Revival Gatherings. And he is someone who has truly mastered the art of creating spaces where humanity can remember itself. If you've ever been in one of his revival circles, you know that they are more than just events. They are prototypes for a new paradigm filled with song, ritual, and a deep mycelial kind of connection. Ben joins me today to share a story that spans the full spectrum of the human experience, from a challenging childhood in Missouri and a pivotal period in prison at age 18 to a Messiah complex born out of a deep desire to save the world. He speaks with incredible vulnerability about what it means to be an uninitiated man and how he eventually learned to trade control for deep listening and the wisdom of living systems. We talk about the manifest man's gathering, the power of gender reconciliation, and his vision for a future, building permanent eco-villages where we don't just gather for a weekend, but live in a constant state of revival. This is a conversation about choosing life when despair feels easier, and about the radical act of being truly seen.
I was listening to FM radio, and Rachmaninoff's theme on Paganini came through. And for those who don't know, this is like a 17-minute saga, the most beautiful piece of classical music that I know. It was the first time that I'd heard it, and I was probably 3 months into this experience and had an absolute revelatory spiritual experience right there in my bunk in prison. And it opened me up to the beauty of the world that I had no idea about, being such a cloistered Midwest boy. And it really catalyzed me for that last month or so in jail to look at the ways in which I didn't know shit.
Ben Browner, welcome to the Wake Up Protocol.
Thank you so much for having me, Nadia. It's sweet to be here.
Such a pleasure to have you here. And I have been in the audience and in the containers of the gatherings that you have put together. And it's just such beautiful work that you're creating in the world. You are the founder and the lead producer of Revival Gatherings. And it's a way to build community. It's a way to help bring people together and really figure out what this new paradigm is all about and how we can all show up in the highest version of ourselves. And I'm just curious if you could tell our audience a little bit about what the work is that you're doing and what the intention behind this is.
Thanks for asking. I first want to bring presence to what we did right before we started the podcast, because that's really where my work is birthed. We took a deep breath together and we centered ourselves. And to me, coming into this wild world that we live in right now, the act, especially lately, of centering myself and preparing myself for what really truly is asking to come through is of the utmost importance. So upon taking that breath and coming into this podcast, I'm just reminded of what's at the core of all of us, at the core of our humanity, at the core of our collective and individual experiences right now. And as I settle into that breath and let my nervous system calm down, I'm just reminded of the deep, deep seed of possibility in every moment. And for me, the events that we put on are simply like a physical manifestation, a social manifestation of that deeper presence, that deeper listening to what wants to come through. On the physical level, we gather upwards of, this past weekend, 175-person choir in the round, recording a live album in this local space here in Port Townsend. Each summer, we host a summer revival with about 500 or so people that come together really to pray and to co-create together to make art. And each winter, we gather now in this circle format, 1,000+ people in the most incredible event cathedral in the Pacific Northwest around a huge globe praising Mama Gaia, Mother Earth. And the soonest coming up from now is the Manifest Gathering. We now produce the largest men's gathering on the West Coast, where about 150 guys come together to heal together, to create together, to cry together, grieve together, and really celebrate our own masculinity. A lot's been happening, especially over the past several years through Revival gatherings, and I'm humbled and honored to be a steward of this container and to be able to not only be in these experiences with these people in the moment, but also to reflect back and record, whether it be through a live album recording process or through a podcast like this, to showcase the possibility, because we're doing some pretty radical things through Revival. And most of what I hear is like, holy shit, like I didn't even know that this was possible to do this type thing together. So thank you for bringing me on the podcast and bringing this into deeper documentation for more people to know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so important that more and more people learn what's actually being done in the circles that you help facilitate. Because every time I am in one of those types of circles, I'm just being reminded, almost like in my DNA, something reawakens of who I actually am and what life could be like if we weren't in a paradigm that is increasingly less working for humanity. And every time I'm in the type of circle with that, oftentimes Max Ribner is helping facilitate with all the beautiful musicians that are part of that. Every time I'm in that circle, I cry and I tell myself, this is the happiest moment of my life right now. And it's something that you guys are creating that is reminding us of how life is supposed to be. Being together with other humans, not in the ego, singing together, dancing together, celebrating together, and really lifting each other up. And that's truly, for me, the beauty of it all. And it's like, how can I take even just one drop of that and then bring that back into the world and somehow help ignite others and give others the experience of what that's actually like and what's possible. And again, it's something that you can only understand when you truly experience it. And then it's this remembrance in a sense. You talked about the Manifest Gathering, and I have so many questions about that. And I keep sending man to that gathering. There is the concept of the wounded masculine, and the patriarchy is probably responsible for creating that. And the masculine, the feminine, there's just so much division and hardship and confusion and a lack of access to the types of emotions and vulnerability that truly make us human. And I would love for you to just talk a little bit about what the Manifest Gathering is all about, what the intention is, and maybe what the transformation is in the men that go there when they come in and when they come out, and, you know, what the aha moments are.
You know, this day and age, by the time this podcast is actually debuted, who knows what will have happened with this whole debacle with Trump and Greenland? Who knows what will have happened with the actions of ICE in this country or with the Venezuelan coup that just happened recently? Right now, we seem to be on a crash course really to global-wide geopolitical destabilization, if not destruction. And centered within that is an outdated worldview, a patriarchal, an uninitiated patriarchal worldview that is at its core a schism of what's good and true in this world. And I am not separate from that. Because I lead this gathering, I don't claim to be a completely healed and initiated male. Most of the facilitators who come, we gather as a leadership team and we talk about what we're really here to do. And Manifest is not a place for prescriptive knowingness. We're not actually enacting that patriarchal worldview by saying, come, we have the answer, we'll heal you. Like this is a transformative process. We're even trying to get away from that transformative language because at its core, that's actually an uninitiated worldview. There's an idea within the seed of Manifest that we are truly getting together to explore from a collective stance, like the deepest questions that we can possibly muster. You know, like that we unearth these through being together and then through ritual, through song, through co-creative activities, through grief. I feel like I'm going to cry now just saying this. Like I've had so many experiences with these men that we are able to uncover the pain that's at the core of that wounded masculine that you speak about, and just really like settle into the pain of that, you know, the grief of that. And like while holding down that end of the spectrum with the grief and the gore and the sadness and the anger, the rage, we then come out of that at some point through the ritual process into the other side of the spectrum, which is radical expression, radical joy, radical interbeing, radical trust, where that typical egoic competition that's normally between men seems to break down, and we're able to be, whether it's through silliness or through gorgeous expression, creativity, like able to touch each other in a way that we wouldn't have been able to had we not gone to the depths together as well. So for me, Manifest is a very small node. I mean, we are the largest men's gathering on the West Coast, but in fact, it's only 150 people. But the idea is to, in exploring the depths that I just described, we're able to ripple it out, as you just described, to those in our families, those in our communities, our best friends, the other than male counterparts in this part of the world. It's like, I'm actually really excited, speaking of other than males. This year we'll actually be integrating females and trans, well, we've had several trans men in years past, but we'll be highlighting the voices of these people in a panel process and in a lot more interaction, to where we're really like opening up the container to listen more directly to people that don't identify as male. And the potency of this interaction has a lot of potential volatility to it. And it's why for the past 3 years, we haven't opened ourselves up to that interaction. We really wanted to make sure that the culture of what we were tending within us was really strong and in integrity, so that we can actually receive some truth-telling from the outside within this container of males and process it in a good way. So there's a lot of cutting-edge things happening within this container that seem subtle. It's like, oh, great, like men and women are going to talk. And to really talk is a very, very profound thing in today's world. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Wow. So you started with it being a male container, and even the language you're using is different from what I was asking you the question in the beginning about that transformation. So if I understand that right, it's not as much about the transformation as it's about the remembering and the coming back to the self, to the rituals, to the ways of being that we have forgotten, but that are somehow still inside of ourselves, inside of our soul, and helping remember that. Am I hearing that right?
The transformation takes place. We just don't promote it. I'd rather focus on being together in community and in communion and allow what wants to happen to happen. It's not the container for everybody. Some people walk away and they won't come back, but we have about a 60% return rate at this point. It really does work for a lot of guys. So we just try not to, you know, in that uninitiated patriarchal sense that I was speaking to before, overpromise some wholesale transformative process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's also letting go of that sense of expectations. I just had a conversation with somebody about expectations and how expectations takes the magic out of everything, because once there's expectations, and if the expectations are not met, which most of the time they're not, because who knows what we think versus what the actual experience is, then there might be disappointment and shutting down. And so, yeah, if there's not that expectation, if it's just a way of coming together, and then whatever happens, happens, then real true magic can unfold.
And it's in that unfolding, we really lean into the process of emergence. And this is another piece about revival that is the nearest and dearest to my heart, is to emulate healthy living systems and evolutionary theory to the best of our abilities. We really step into these spaces with a skeletal structure of what we want to happen, what we think could or should happen. And then as the experience unfolds, we sense into what's happening. We listen really, really deeply with our whole body through the leadership team. And we try to respond in a way that can't be scripted. And it's the trust that we're building in ourselves internally, in our leadership team as a small group, and in the container at large that really buoys what comes forth. Like last year at Manifest, we had some of the most incredible ritual and musical and passion show experiences. Like it can't even be described. Like you were saying in the beginning, just like crying, like this is the most precious moment of my life.
Yeah.
And you really can't plan those out. So it's another part of stripping away that uninitiated masculine, is to not try to control, to really step in with a listening ear and attunement, to that almost feminine quality, because this isn't about becoming more manly. This is about really integrating the masculine and the feminine in a way that doesn't demasculate us, but actually integrates the softer, more receptive sides of our masculinity so that we can be better humans and better partners and better community members. And a lot of that these days is about listening and about just letting go a little bit and really attuning to what's asking to come through and trying to act in service of what's healthy for the whole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I heard several women say that we should bring women into men's circles to help add to the experience. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're going to do now. Start bringing some women and trans people into the circle to help people see a little bit more of what the opposite gender is all about. What, there's the word expectation. I'm going to not use that. What's your intention to bring that feminine in? What's your hope for that?
Yeah. We've had several trans guys with us at Manifest. In fact, our first aid lead is a trans man, and just absolutely incredible to have his voice and presence in the mix with all of us. Really, like, my intention is to demystify it, the fact, that every time I post about Manifest online, somebody chimes in, well, are trans men welcome? Like, blah, blah, kind of like this accusatory. And I'm like, yeah, they're already here. They're more than welcome. And I want to feel that way as well about like a larger population of people who don't identify as male. And it's a delicate subject matter. So I want to give a shout out to Jenny Jali and the Temple of Belonging down in the Portland area, an incredible women's gathering that's been going for 3 or 4 years strong now. And we've been lightly musing on the idea of having some type of, intersectional gathering where men and women are getting together. Maybe I shouldn't be publicizing this ahead of time, but it feels really, really exciting. And what we're doing through Manifest this year is just experimenting on a smaller scale with that concept. And so the intention really is to titrate into this space, to normalize it, and to build capacity as men to receive this type of truth-telling and hold it in a way that doesn't rattle our core so much that a larger contingent giving us some truth can be held as well in future times. I feel like the idea of, as I was speaking to earlier, like really hearing each other, really having a conversation, especially in a large group, if held well, can be one of the more radical gender reconciliatory moments, this day and age. And there's gender reconciliation circles happening everywhere. But if I'm honest with myself and with the podcast listeners here, I've not been as big a part of those circles in the recent 5 to 10 years. And the social landscape has changed so much. And a lot of the people who are interested in being at Manifest, Manifest is like a very wide umbrella. We really hold the fest part of Manifest as a core part of our philosophy. So we're inviting men into an experience that's very joyful, and it's a large group. It's very accessible in a whole lot of ways. And we've kind of likened ourselves to being like the gateway drug to deeper men's work. We're doing a lot of really deep men's work there, but men can arrive there knowing that they're not coming into a 4-day grief ceremony, which actually is pretty scary for a lot of guys. So the intention in bringing women in is to kind of just really titrate into these gender reconciliation conversations in a way that is accessible, and while depthful and nuanced, it's also fairly introductory, because to be real, I need softness and I need to be eased into a lot of this more difficult material. Like I'll own that for myself. Like I don't want to throw myself and my nervous system into the deep end. So this is a way for us to really get a taste of it and then choose into, from this larger container, whether or not we want to go into deeper depths with this gender reconciliation work, because there's a whole host of networks and gatherings that we can point people to from Manifest.
Right. And you are creating all kinds of different things. You have a cohort, you have different gatherings, you're facilitating other things. Can you maybe go into some detail about the various things that you're currently involved in and spearheading?
Yeah. What I'm really most excited about right now, you just mentioned, is the Revival Learning Cohort. So for those who aren't familiar with this term cohort, it's essentially just a group of people getting together to learn or to act in some certain way. And it's really focused on education. I put a call out in late 2025 for a couple of Revival interns. I'm getting to the point now where we've got many large-scale gatherings each year, and I can't hold it all on my own. So in putting that call out, I received about 35 people ecstatically reaching out, just enthusiastic about interning with Revival. And I had no idea that that was coming my way. And after talking with some mentors and other folks, it became really obvious that there was a deep yearning for this type of material in the world. And what's on offer here, really, our tagline is stewarding community through conscious event production. Mm-hmm. So I, own and am owning more and more my capacity and my role as a leader in this community and the responsibility that comes with it. And, we're talking about the uninitiated masculine. There's a tendency, it lives in my own body as well, to say, Revival is mine, Manifest is mine, and my co-producers, of course. And we hold the keys to this kingdom, and we got to build it out and make it this huge thing, and it has to have the most social impact and the most environmental impact. I recognize that tendency in myself at the same time that I recognize, how is it that the larger movement of movements is going to happen? How is it going to succeed? How is the trials of the day going to be overcome? And that's through more beauty, through more people gathering, through more people getting together. So this cohort really is about giving people the keys to the event production kingdom. There is so much beauty out there, and all these people that are coming to Revival events, they have the seed of gatherings in their hearts. I hear it all the time, but they don't have the know-how or the courage to go out and do it. So we're offering a 3-month journey where you can step in and from the core out, access your own vision, understand more deeply the needs of the world, and be able to really integrate those two things in a way that gives you confidence and knowingness of what it is that you want to bring, what your gifts and your dreams and your vision are, so as to better meet those needs in the world. And the second half of the cohort is going to be all about how to do that, the nuts and bolts of production. Mm-hmm. So we're teaching people everything from the fiduciary, the budgetary spreadsheets, to the packing lists, to the deeper philosophies and facilitation techniques that help you to build congruence in a group. And people are buying in to this learning opportunity. We've got about 25 people enrolled now, and probably cap it around 30 or 40. And at the end, we're going to showcase all that we've learned together in true, rippling Revival fashion. At the summer Revival, we're going to do a big extended workshop teaching other people how to do this as well. And for me, this is really about attuning to how, as I said earlier, healthy living systems work. This process of the Revival cohort and, rippling these learnings out into the world is just at its most simple form an emulation of what life does. At its core, life begets life, begets life, begets life. To win at the game of life is to really help everything around you to win as well. Mm-hmm. We're creating the conditions for more and more life to flourish. So, right now, while everything seems to be falling apart geopolitically, it is actually causing, from that mycelial mat that seems invisible underneath the surface, it's causing everything to also come together all at once. So while everything's falling apart, everything's coming together at once. I wrote a poem and a song about this. And the idea is that through this Renaissance process, that we continue to build our capacity and we continue to build the depth of relationship and connection between each other so that we can all take part in this Renaissance, in this reckoning, in this rebellion, in this reclamation, in this revival of culture. This is some of the most integral and important times that any part of humanity has ever lived through, with the rise of AI and everything else. And my deepest question is, how can I foster within myself and in my wider community a capacity to meet these times with deep, deep creativity in service to something larger than ourselves that really expands past the travails of geopolitical bullshit, excuse my French, and gets to the core, like that nested core of like why we're all here, whether you call it God or spirit or soul or creativity or life. There is something so much deeper than the playing fields that all the politicians and the economy is based on. And I really want to continue to draw attention back to that, to those deeper foundations, and ask the question, how is it that we can create from those places in very small circles and expanding in integrity into much larger and more influential circles to create the type of conditions that we need for humanity in the more than human world to thrive for generations to come.
So beautiful. What it brings up for me is I'm originally from Switzerland, and I do go there quite often. And when I'm there, people say, what are you doing in the United States right now? Why don't you come move back here? And I keep telling them that right here in the Pacific Northwest of the United States is a type of energy, and it's what you talked to right now, that mycelial energy. As everything is starting to fall apart, there's something new emerging. And the quality of humans that are here right now, that are willing to start stepping into this new reality and start helping to usher in that new paradigm, that's what I want to be surrounded with in this time. So I'm not running away from it. I'm jumping right into the middle of the fire because I want to see what's there and what I can help create as part of that to help usher in that new paradigm, because it's coming. And if not us, then who? So we got to just all really show up, every single one of us, and everybody who feels like they have no power and who am I to? It's like, yes, you and you and you, all of us. And so it takes a few people like you to help show us that this is possible and help create the containers that we can start finding ourselves and then going from there. And just the fact that you create this cohort to help future facilitators, to help give them the tools, those future facilitators, is so powerful. The very first time that I had my very first spiritual awakening, and that's kind of coming back to the core of what this podcast is all about, was at Burning Man. I was at Burning Man. I took some psilocybin. I was there doing a little temple burn, and I felt that sense of togetherness, that, oh my God, there is so much more than I thought was the reality that I was told. And in this togetherness, and not almost, there's grief, right? Because people put all of their things they're letting go of into that temple, including ashes of loved ones and so forth, all the intentions and the pain they want to let go of. And then it burns, and we're holding this container together and coming together. So that was the first time that I had a spiritual awakening, and really things shifted for me in that moment. And then seeing all these beautiful festivals, Imagine Festival, Beloved Festival, Lightning in a Bottle Festival, all these festivals coming out of this. And I'm not sure if that's really historically how it happened, if it started with Burning Man. I mean, there was rainbow gatherings and so forth. There were a lot of these in the past. For me, the gateway drug was Burning Man. I got into that container. And after that, I started realizing what my soul really wanted and how I wanted to start shift myself. And it's the gatherings that really created that platform for me to have those experiences. And it's something that cannot be told. It's something that has to be experienced. So yeah, the fact that you're scaling it by giving more people the tools to start creating those gatherings is, to me, incredibly beautiful and important. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to say thank you for being here and for listening. Your support for this podcast means more than you can imagine. If this conversation is landing for you, I'd love to invite you to go a little deeper with us. You can sign up for the Wake Up Protocol newsletter at thewakeuprotocol.com. That's where we share tools, bonus insights, and discounts on upcoming offerings to help you integrate these conversations into your own life. And if someone comes to mind while you're listening, someone who needs to hear this message right now, Please share this episode with them, or even 3 people who feel like they're standing at the edge of something big. This podcast grows through word of mouth, and your sharing truly helps this work reach the people it's meant for. Okay, let's return to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm curious what your personal story is, how you got to become a more spiritual person.
You know, you bring up the temple at the Burn, and I've been to Burning Man almost 10 times. I haven't been back in almost 15 years now, but 17 years old, I traveled from Missouri to the deserts of Nevada. And for the first time in a really long time, I felt myself able to open up and cry so deeply being in that very temple. Yeah. As I just said, I was born and raised a Missouri boy. My mom was a nurse manager in AIDS clinical trials, and my dad owned blues clubs my entire life. So I was kind of positioned between a really interesting dynamic where my mother was around dying people all day. This is the early 90s, and was really depressed as a result of that. She withdrew really deeply into alcoholism, and I always kind of joke half-heartedly that my mom probably didn't drink for maybe like 5 or 6 nights of my entire life. And my sister and I were kind of caught in this web of sadness, and pain and abuse that I wouldn't wish on anybody. But now that I look back on it, and I see it juxtaposed with the ecstatic experiences that I had with my dad in his clubs around these incredible multicultural musicians, and the fact that he lived outside of the city and we had access to some of the most beautiful natural environments in the Midwest. I can see the story arc in how I became, at a very young age, who I am today. I feel like this podcast is really about spiritual awakening, and the idea of awakening for me is there wasn't like a defined moment in life. I mean, there were many acute moments, but in actuality, it was like a very long arc, like where the pain and sadness and that deep pushing down of what I was afraid to know within myself as a result of that pain, it was released bit by bit, mostly through music, really, through the process of feeling into people and things that were larger than the pain that I had within me, and sensing that not only was there relief and escapism through music, because I ended up touring with Fish and The Dead and a whole bunch of other jam bands and everything, and there was plenty of relief and escapism there, but there was ecstatic reclamation of that pain and grief at the same time. And being in the natural world was a huge catalyst for me to get away from the grief and the pain and the depression that was my family system, and to just find resolve and relief in like the smallest little corners of the natural world. There's just such a spectrum there, such a juxtaposition, and I feel like we all have this to varying degrees in our lives. And my story is no different from many of the people here, that spectrum was there, that juxtaposition was there. And in the end, to jump way far ahead, like I've chosen life, It would be very easy to fall into despair with everything in my childhood and with everything going on in the world. And much like many other people who I'm sure are on your podcast, we can't let that happen.
Yeah. I'm choosing life is definitely a theme that I hear a lot here on this podcast. And yeah, that's that choice that we get to make. It's like, do we want to continue the way things are? Do we see a possibility into a different kind of future? And what does that look like? And what's my role in that as we're stepping into that? Me too. I've been suicidal in the past, and at some point I chose life, and here I am, still doing life, humaning. So you did talk about a Messiah complex at some point and overcoming that. Can you maybe go a little bit into what that looked like for you?
Yeah, that's a tender place. We've been talking a lot about masculinity and the tendencies toward control, or in my case, this larger tendency was really born out of a desire to help originally. So being through the experience of my mother's alcoholism, trying to help her for, the better part of 2 decades without being able to make much headway, and watching her kill herself night after night after night. And eventually, around the age of 23, my mom did end up killing herself through alcoholism, through cirrhosis of the liver. She passed very suddenly. I came to this deep-seated desire to save the world. I transferred the pain and desire that I had to save my mom onto the world. And like a good Midwest boy, I was naive as to how the rest of the world actually worked, and thought that I could create I was really deeply involved in activism at that point, and was working towards creating it's funny, like the way that these layers of life kind of build upon themselves. My more naive and embryonic version of Revival was geared towards promoting an understanding of these world-changing ideas through marketing, essentially. I was creating a ton of, literally like 20,000 sticker runs of these evolutionary quotes, and creating what I called dry erase automagnets, and these huge databases of inspirational quotes that people could, erase and write again on the back of their car every day if they wanted to, and created this platform called Unite Us, www.unite.us, which now is owned by the Rockefeller Institute. That was a really good move, buying that URL, by the way. And just thought that somehow I was going to change the entire world through spreading positivity. And, it's not that fun of a story, because really it's shameful. It feels like I was this uninitiated boy thinking that I could change the world, and I was dismissing a lot of really good work that was happening around me in the process, and not recognizing that, as Messiah complex exhibits, there's a thought that, I alone can do this. And I denigrated the deep mycelial web of good work happening in St. Louis around me, and just was siloed in my efforts. And I still think that Unite Us was a fantastic idea, but there was a reason it didn't really take off. And because at the core, I was actually siloed, and there was a schism within myself that wasn't integrated with the rest of society. And, as upon moving to the West Coast, I had my ass handed to me. I was like, oh my God, there is so much happening in this world. And for the better part of a couple of years, I just stepped back and just went into learning mode. It took a lot of ego dissolution and reintegrating myself with the greater web of humanity, and just humbling myself to mentors and into courses and into various certifications, and just really learning up so as to be a better member of society and understand how this web worked a bit better. There was no serious drama through my Messiah complex, as I describe it, but I did lose a lot of friends, and it did catapult me into the next chapter of my life. And the healing that was done through letting that tendency go to see myself as something more powerful than I actually was has greatly informed me since.
Wow. What an interesting experience you went through, and what an incredibly difficult experience you had, having to witness your mother's demise with alcohol and eventually losing her at a young age, and then somehow taking that and wanting to save the world and doing the best you could, having the knowledge, the skills, the education available to you at that time. And just, I really want to acknowledge you for taking action and starting something. And obviously that was the beginning, and you did get humbled in one way or another. And yet there was also just building those muscles of what does that look like to start making change happen. We're not taught how to do that. And here you are, both creating these containers for people, as well as starting to create educational systems for people to actually learn the very things that you didn't have at the time. So to me, that's really beautiful and really powerful. And it seems like you just learned so much through this that it eventually got you to where you are today. And even now, you're just in the beginning. There's so much more ahead of you, and I can't wait to see everything you're going to be creating and the amazing ripple effect that's going to come from all that passion. I always ask my guests if I can look at their astrological chart. And of course, I took a quick peek at you, and you're an Aquarius sun. And we're moving into the age of Aquarius right now. Pluto is in Aquarius right now for the next 20-ish years. And it's all about community and coming back to the collective. And that's really the work you're doing. So in terms of the stars, you're definitely doing the work you're supposed to be doing. And so I'm completely not surprised you're doing the work that you're doing. And you're definitely on the right track. And I feel so honored that our paths have crossed, and I get to see not only be part in the containers, but also get to look into the mothership where it all starts and how it starts rippling out. And I'm really curious about your personal spiritual awakening. So you've already talked about your personal story and what happened. I know you shared something about also spending a little bit of time in jail at some point. Was that part of your awakening too, or what did your awakening look like?
Yeah. As I said, it's had a lot of acute moments throughout life, but it's been a much longer arc, as is probably true for everybody. I can't define one particular moment, but one of the earlier moments was, so I was really heavily involved in some hard drugs and the wrong people growing up, influenced by the challenging family system that I had, and was drinking a lot and ended up, to be frank, doing a drug deal that went really, really wrong, and having guns involved, and really being highly traumatized and retaliating towards somebody in a way that was very dumb. Yeah, to put it bluntly, and very public at the same time. And I was very much under the influence at the time, and ended up on the nightly news for many nights in a row, and was sent to prison for assault with a deadly weapon. And I was 18 years old, and luckily, being in a privileged family system, my extended family is fairly wealthy. I was able to afford a good lawyer and was helped in that sense. Had I not been, I would have been in prison for a much longer time. But yeah, I did about 3 or 4 months in prison there in Missouri for assault with a deadly weapon. And in that time came to some really deep moments of introspection. The strangest one out of all of them, we had Walkman back in the day, and I was listening to FM radio, and Rachmaninoff's theme on Paganini came through. And for those who don't know, this is like a 17-minute saga, the most beautiful piece of classical music that I know. It was the first time that I'd heard it, and that was probably 3 months into this experience, and had an absolute revelatory spiritual experience right there in my bunk in prison. And it opened me up to the beauty of the world that I had no idea about, being such a cloistered Midwest boy. And it really catalyzed me for that last month or so in jail to look at the ways in which I didn't know shit. And I owned a landscaping company for a while, and was getting into the idea of permaculture and ecological landscaping, and just continued to want to open myself up to those ways in which I was newly understanding the world. And I couldn't go back after that. I mean, it was a wake-up call, and it was a shameful, shameful wake-up call to be seen not only by my mom and my dad and my sister, but by my extended family and our wider community as somebody who could do such a stupid and heinous thing. It really drove me to want to change in a way that I'd not yet had the capacity for, and step into a version of me that didn't allow myself to get sidetracked by the pressures of society. And I still got in a little trouble over the years, and still do to this day, and I like it a little bit. But for the most part, I keep it reined in, and I really try to stay centered through all of the hurricanes of the modern age. That was a really big turning point in my life, and there are many others as well, but that was a really pivotal one at a young age.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing is it was music that was that big turning point for you. And
Again.
music is the very thing that you keep coming back to and help facilitate for others to experience. And you experience it all by yourself. And you're now bringing community together around that. So yeah, that sounds like it was a big, big moment of awakening for you. How beautiful is that? And then how long did it take you from that to kind of start realizing what that was and how that was going to change your life?
Musically?
Just in general, like once you had that experience and listened to that song and sort of had these revelations of a different world that's possible, like what were the steps that followed that? Because some people have just these moments and then it's like, okay, at this moment and now I'm back in my reality. What changed for you in that moment?
Yeah, well, there was a little bit of that, but I think the biggest thing for me was a letting go of the social systems that I had been a part of up to that point. Like a realization that just because I'd been banging my head against the wall, for 18 years in a certain direction doesn't mean that I have to continue doing that. There was a lot of beauty and benefit to the social systems that I was a part of. And also there was just a lot of detriment. So it gave me the kind of leverage, the courage to step back from those guys that I'd been hanging out with, and bless their souls. Like I love most of them to this day, but we don't hang out anymore. We keep in touch tangentially sometimes, but by and large, I stepped away, and it was really hard because that was my whole universe. And they all started hating on me. And one was literally sending me death threats and telling me that I was disloyal. I mean, it was essentially like a modern day gang of sorts. And even 15 years later, when I was 35, like 5 years ago, I was receiving death threat texts from this one person in that friend group that, because I'd left, felt so just wronged by me that he wanted me to experience pain as a result of how I disowned him. And it took a lot of courage to step away, but that experience of being in prison was really like the catalyst that helped me to see more clearly and to do so, even though there was a period of 3 to 5 years where I didn't really have a friend group and I was lonely. I was in this pit of transformation day in and day out where I had very little people to share it with. Eventually, that's actually what catalyzed me to move to the West Coast and meet all the people that, even just upon arriving in Seattle, like I met some of the core people that very first week that I still know to this day, 15, 17 years later. So these arcs of history, of time, and these catalyst points in our lives really do forecast forward the seed of who we are today. And this one's no different.
Wow. Yeah. And I find it so fascinating that you're talking about these systems, the social systems that you were part of that eventually got you in trouble, that you almost needed to be isolated in that prison and have access to that music. Fortunately, they would let you listen to music, which also, like, kind of on a side note, makes me think, how can we bring more music into prisons so that people can have that there, right? There's so much more we could go into here. But then so the social systems and then the living systems that you're building now. So how do you see social systems versus living systems, and what's the difference for you?
There is no difference. I'd say the social systems that we currently have, whether it's even the punitive systems like prison, we are a living system. We are the earth. We are not separate from nature. And these types of phrases are bandied about in conscious culture all the time, but truly at our essence, we are absolutely no different from the earth. We are actually her children. And to separate ourselves is to see the social systems different from living systems is this schism. So, as I said, coming to the West Coast and learning about permaculture and ecology and regenerative agriculture, and I got certifications in soil science and compost science, and really deeply understanding how the web of life works. Like, it's really of absolutely no surprise that we grew this awareness, this consciousness of ourselves as we evolved as humans and thought that we were separate. It's almost a natural arc of the journey for humans to play this story out. And as I did with this Messiah complex and with thinking that it was a siloed effort that was going to save the world, it's like all these things kind of integrate. They come together to hold a mirror up to the I keep using this word uninitiated. There's a deep, like, hero's journey in what Samantha Sweetwater calls a kinship journey. We're doing the Joseph Campbell's hero journey. this day and age together, like as a Sangha, as a community, we're recognizing our interconnection and seeing ourselves as a part of this web of life, of interbeing that cannot be separate from one another. Yeah, I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. It's all the same. We just need to, the way I see it is we just need to be in the right frequency. And then from that frequency, if we all show up for me, it's the frequency of love, joy, and peace. If we can all show up in that frequency, then we can create those types of systems that truly serve all of us. And rather than this egotistical way that I need to win, it's like if everyone around me wins, I win automatically, because everything.
And it's so much more fun too.
Oh my God, is it so much more fun? I mean that too, right? Oh my God. And we're having so much fun in those circles too, where we're getting to prototype and test what does that look like. And I know you have some experience and or interest. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure exactly where you're at with that, with building conscious communities. And I'm curious if you could maybe talk a little bit about conscious communities, because that's something where my heart truly yearns to be in. Gosh, this loneliness epidemic that we're in. And I've been feeling lonely so many times in my life. And then the moment I'm around people, it's like, what I personally like is I like to be together alone. And I think in the conscious community, you get to do that. You get to come together and you get to spend time together, but then you also get to be alone, but knowing that you have community, that you're held, that you're not alone. And if you do need to tap back into community, they're right there. So it's like that mix for me. And maybe just to tell you a little bit about my upbringing, I grew up with my parents and my brother, and then my grandparents, and then my mom's sister and her family. And my grandparents had a piece of land in Switzerland, and they gave a part of that land to my mom and part of that land to my mom's sister. And there was a little micro community that we had, and we had a couple of dogs. You know, we had a dachshund, and my mom's sister had a basset hound. And there was a swimming pool, and there was some, like, I don't even know what you call it. It's like a pole and little strings coming down from it, and we could like swing on those. It was almost like a trapeze, but it was swinging around. And we would invite our friends there. And so I grew up with a sense of community. When my parents weren't there, I could go to my grandparents or to my mom's sister, and there was always someone around. And I really felt held. And we grew some vegetables, and my dad had a little pond, and he introduced us to the nature of the pond and how the dragonfly is first in the water and then eventually turns into, you know, a flying object. It was just such a beautiful experience. And then once we moved away, all that started falling apart for me, and I'm still yearning to be in that container again. So how do you see community, conscious community? What do you think is possible? And if we had all the resources in the world, what could we create that would start helping people feel more alive and connected and creative?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because in this very moment, I'm sitting in a communal house that I was invited to be a part of for a portion of the winter because I was in pain and isolation at my place. So for those who don't know, I caretook my father, who had a massive stroke back in early 2024 for about 12 months. 24/7 care, you know, feeding, toileting, everything, and also ushered him into his transition through the Washington Medical Aid and Dying Program and stewarded his death. And in that process, and this is just a year ago, I formed some addictive patterns, and I isolated quite a bit, and through the grief and pain of those moments, came into a side of myself that hadn't surfaced in a really long time. And when he had his stroke, in the process of constructing several tiny homes on my property and getting ready to rent all them out, but they were only half finished, I've been living in a construction zone now for like 3 years. And isolated because I've not been able to rent these places out. And I spent all of my nest egg on my father's well-being and wasn't able to work during that year. And frankly, I'm broke right now. And it's been really freaking hard, you know? And so to convey some of this to my wider community, humbly, vulnerably, I've been invited to live at this community house in Port Townsend through a good portion of the winter. And I'm just so grateful for that. And, these type of patterns have been occurring throughout all of my life, where there's this desire to individuate and then a recognition that I need to get back into a deeper communal setting from a living perspective. And I've co-created several different eco-villages and a live-in turtle sanctuary in Malaysia, which is still thriving to this day, 20 years later. And through each one of these experiences, through the widening of the aperture to community and all of the pain points that come with that, I've learned so much more about what it takes to live together in a good way. Right now, where I'm at with it is that revival at large is actually an ephemeral practice in that communal living. So we come together for 3 or 4 days and really practice and learn all of the different cultural techniques and artistic ways through which to bind ourselves in a really good way. But then we let off the pressure release valve and we go back to our own communities. And my deepest desire through this whole arc is that I return to my eco-village roots and that we bring into being a venue, really. There's something yearning to be born from this whole culture change system, for me at least, in that my deepest desire is always to live on land with a group of people and to be able to host transformative gatherings. So I want to integrate. I've done eco-village design certification courses. I've been certified and really heavily leveraged a lot of group decision-making processes and group facilitation. I've sat on the boards of many nonprofits, and I'm really seeing the potential of leveraging the culture of revival into a place, having a place-based venue that we can really ground the deepest chords of this co-creative beauty and do so in a way that kind of depolarizes, that separates me and the revival community from doing so much infrastructural work each time we create one of these ephemeral villages. I'm really, really excited to integrate all of this learning that I've had for decades around eco-village design and facilitation, group facilitation, decision-making processes into something that can hold its own and also turn over a profit, make revenue, and hold the culture of what's happening without having to come together and, dissolve weekend after weekend after weekend. Mm-hmm. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but I've been really, really impacted by communal living situations in my life and feel like there's so much promise to them. And my deepest learnings throughout it all is that there either needs to be some deep financial injections to create the fecundity that people can de-stress the connective aspects of that co-living situation, and or there needs to be a deep, deep spiritual foundation to why it is that we're getting together, why we're doing what we're doing. And I believe both those things are possible through this culture building around revival, and I feel really excited to experiment with it. I'm currently creating a pitch deck around some of these ideas, and there's a lot of potential. I'm seeing a real pilgrimage of a venue, like a place where people pilgrimage multiple times a year to be in deep, deep ceremony with 500 to 1,000 people, with the most incredible musicians and culture tenders and everything that we've been doing, but at a scale and with a permanence that really grounds the energy instead of allowing it to disperse time after time. Mm-hmm. That's what's most exciting to me right now in Conscious Community.
What a beautiful vision. And I really wish you all the success in the world, that this is going to start manifesting sooner than later. I can already see it. I can already see myself in it too. So it's beautiful. Thank you. We're coming towards the end, and I want to make sure our listeners get a chance to find you, and also if you have any offerings you want to share.
Yeah, we have a website, revivalgatherings.com. Through that, you can find all of the events that we're doing on our events page. We have this Revival Cohort, which will likely be in full swing by the time this is published, but in all likelihood, we'll be doing these in years to come as well. June 24th through 29th is the Manifest Men's Gathering that we'd spoken earlier about. That'll happen around the Port Townsend area. July 30th through August 3rd is the summer revival, also around the Port Townsend area. And actually, literally just this morning, I solidified the negotiations with Dean Thomason and the bishop of the Episcopalian Church. And we'll be doing another set of circle gatherings November 20th and 21st, so that weekend before so-called Thanksgiving there at St. Mark's Episcopalian Cathedral in Seattle. There's a really incredible multicultural lineup coming together for that. And I just sent out the final emails this morning. You guys, it's officially happening. What do we want to do here? Really, really excited about that.
Wow, so many beautiful offerings you have. And I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes so people can easily find that. And yeah, just before we end, I always ask this one final question. If you could go back in time and give a message to a younger version of you, what would you tell him?
I would say something to the effect of assuring him that it's okay, that it's all going to be okay, and you are okay to be exactly who you are, not to fear the ways in which you're different from other people or the pain or grief inside of you, and that in actuality you'll someday come to find that those pain points are actually your gifts, that they are superpowers, and leveraging that into authentic, vulnerable expression and forms of leadership that people can really learn to trust by showing your whole self is like, that's the whole game here. Continue to open up, continue to unveil those harder parts of yourself, those more teary parts of yourself. And yeah, just be seen. Just be seen, man. There's no thing or person that can hurt you if you're being authentic. And if they try, it may sting initially, but just keep showing up. The right people will be attracted to who you truly are.
What a beautiful message. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, for your vulnerability, for all the amazing work you're doing to help usher in a new world. And it was such an honor to have this conversation with you, Ben. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Nadia. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wake Up Protocol. If you like what you heard, share this episode with 3 people who need to hear this message. And if you want to go deeper with this work, head to thewakeupprotocol.com and join our email list. That's where this podcast turns into practice. You'll receive tools to help you integrate what you're hearing, bonus resources, and behind-the-scenes insights we only share with our community, along with early access and special invites. If this podcast helps you feel less alone and more like yourself, the newsletter is where we continue the conversation. And if this is the last thing you hear from us, all we'd like to say is keep going, trust yourself, follow your heart. Until next time, have a safe and happy journey.